Yo, what is going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another event breakdown video. Today we are going to go over the top 32 of the American National event for the Dragon Ball Super card game. There is just so much to talk about when it relates to this event. What we're going to do in this video, we're going to talk about the event, some of the stuff that was announced at the event, as well as go through a few of the top 32 deck lists for each of the different leaders that were played here. First and foremost, I got to shout out PPG for hosting an excellent event. Their national tournament was run very smoothly. I had a great time. Even though it was quite a long day, it went from about, I think it started round one at 10:30 a.m., I want to say, and then we got out of there about 12:30 a.m. So we were there for quite some time, but that's not their fault. You know, it was a long day. It was 9 rounds because of how many players were there. 500 players. We broke the record for the biggest Dragon Ball Super Nationals in the game's history, which is incredible. I also want to shout out the incredible stream staff, Stage Zero. Shout out to Eggman, shout out to Brian Brown, Android, who created this graphic that we're going to use. I know this is like a little bit less of a production quality than I normally do. Not that I have like some obscenely high production quality anyway, but it's about midnight here. I've just gotten back from Nationals myself, and I have work in the morning, so I'm trying to get this one out quickly and while it's relevant, and talk to you guys about the decks here. So that's why it kind of looks the way it looks, but we are going to use this graph they created for that. Also, of course, I want to shout out my teammate Danny as well as Giancarlo for putting on an incredible stream performance alongside the Stage Zero guys. So before we get into the breakdown, I just want to mention here, for anyone who hasn't heard or seen yet, this is huge news for the game. Honestly, it felt like Christmas when they announced before round one that the game is getting an online client. Dragon Ball Super card game is getting an online client. I think this is going to be so good for the game. I think it's going to attract so many more players. I think it's going to just be great for the overall growth of the game. So for anyone who didn't hear that or is just hearing it out for the first time, I think that's incredible news. We won't really know more about it. All we really know now is that it's coming out. We just know that it's a thing in development. We'll learn more about it, I believe, in March at the Dragon Ball Super Battle Hour, which is an event they've been having for a few years now. So we'll learn more about it in a few months, and of course, I'm probably gonna get into streaming it. So there's that. That's really exciting. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into this top 32 breakdown. Just want to cover those few things before we got into it. All right, top 32 leader breakdown. We have a red-blue meta here, it seems like, at least at first glance. And the most topping deck and the deck that goes on to win the US national event is Crimson Goku. There is so much to talk about when it comes to this leader. It was obviously an unknown quantity going into the event. All the builds, by the way, in Top Cut, at least between the different teams, are very different. Like, there are kind of three camps of the Crimson deck. We have our own team, which is Team Crossworld. So we had myself, Marcus Cantarsi, and Marcel Russell squeaking in top 32, and Marcus going on to take second place at the national event with our build of Crimson, which was honestly more so built to beat Red. We weren't really expecting to play many mirror matches, and I talked a lot about this in the deck profile we did with Marcus in yesterday's video, so be sure to check that out if you want to see the second place national runner-up deck list. But yeah, that was what our build kind of revolved around. And then for my opinion on the Super Players build, shout out to Josh Ruiz, who ended up in top 16, I believe. His build was super decked out for the mirror match. I mean, he was playing Ramp in his deck, higher end bombs, expecting to go into a late game, which I wouldn't necessarily know from testing if those cards are going to help so much against the red decks, but they are certainly incredibly good in the mirror. And then, of course, got to give it to Andrew Duvall, taking the second, U.S. American Nationals win for himself, playing a build that I think is very balanced. I think it's very balanced between the mirror and against the red decks, and we're going to look at his build in just a moment, but after we get to the breakdown. So we have 6 Red Sin, 5 Goku and Vegeta GT, basically the SS4 Gogeta deck. And yeah, I mean, I think this is pretty par for the course. I mean, obviously no one really expected Crimson to dominate as much as it did, but as far as the red representation goes, this makes a lot of sense. I think people were kind of expecting maybe SS3 Reboot to take up Crimson's spot, but that ended up not being the case. Crimson just being an incredible mid-range deck, just fitting a ton of great blue generic stuff in there, definitely showed out. Then we have 3 Gamma, we have 2 Vegito. I think these are a bit low from what I honestly expected. I felt like Vegito was really good going into this tournament. I was considering playing it myself. I think a lot of people were hiding their builds because we didn't really see it do much at Zenkai Cups, where it was actually legal for play, and I've never seen a Vegito list atop a Zenkai Cup. But still, I mean, a good showing, getting 2 into top 16, where this is actually a very diverse top 32. I do think it's a good showing. I do think Gamma is also a bit underrepresented. I think that was a deck that at least we prepared heavy for going into the tournament, and I thought a lot more people would get into Top Cut with it. But still, I mean, a strong deck, of course, nonetheless. The Crimson versus Gamma matchup is very interesting. I mean, I think any blue mirror is going to be very grindy, very skill intensive. So, yeah, just seems to be that way. Then we have an Android 21. Shout out to Rohit. I'm not going to go over his deck in this video because I am planning to do a deck profile with him. Shout out to him. We'll be getting that, sometime this week. Trunks Vegeta taking 3rd place at the tournament. We'll go over that list for sure. 1 Reboot Gotenks. We'll go over that. 1 Android 16. Shout out to Jared Lopez, who is just an Android 16 Pro. 1 Gogeta BR. This is the Gogeta BR Exodia deck. Basically, tries to set up the turn 2, turn 3 kill. We have a Reboot Beerus and a Reboot Pan. So we're going to go over a few of these lists right now. Let's start with the event winning list played by Andrew Duvall. So we go over to his build here. We notice his main deck is 56 cards. This leader cycles through the deck like no other because of the Unawakened side. Once per battle, but not once per turn, you can pitch a sand to draw a card. So you're seeing a lot of cards, especially if your opponent's attacking you quite a bit. Going through here, Borgos, incredible main board. I talked about this in the video yesterday as well. It's just a barrier sand that draws a card that has an upside in blue mirrors. So that's just, you can't ask for much more. SS Rose Goku Black Mortals Be Gone. This is a card that we didn't play in our build on Team Crossroll, which I wish we really found a way to fit it in. This card is just way too broken, man. Like, 1 energy, it draws a card, it kills a guy during battle. The only stipulation is you have to have 3 or more Z energy, which Crimson is very, very good at setting up thanks to Videl Harness Power. This is essentially a free Z energy just by playing this leader. It's really good in that regard. Another interesting thing too is that Duvall and his guys, they teched 2 Zeno Edge of Space and 2 Vegeta Discipline Warrior as their super combos. Again, this is like splitting the difference between wanting to be aggressive and faster paced, but also wanting to be very defensive with the ability to untap and make more defensive plays, which is really good. The cool thing about Zeno is that you can play around Broly Crown, just keep 1 energy open, but it operates a lot like Senzu Bean, which this build plays 3 of, in that you can get that energy on demand and then tap it again immediately for something like a Beerus Destroids or an Unbreakable Goku, and then get back into that 1 energy open range and play around the Broly Crown. The other really cool thing that I found about, or that I thought was cool about Andrew's list, is the inclusion of the Tapion Unison and 0 Boo Unison. I find that to be vastly intriguing. Tapion ended up being a really, really strong Unison that I don't think anyone saw coming. It simply just draws a card. It plays around Smoke Dragon because it's a 3-cost Unison. It doesn't necessarily offer the same board presence as Boo, where it's like stopping as many attacks. But the fact that it's an earlier Unison plays around Gohan Beast SCR really, really well, which I think we saw in the finals. Having this Unison hit the board a bit earlier, it's kind of like that perfect spot because it's 1 turn too late for Smoke to hit it, but it's also 1 turn earlier than Boo, so you can't always get blitzed by Gohan Beast. It's a really interesting dynamic there. And then we have 2 Trunks Calamity Challenger, which can search out that Unison, and it's also a pitchable sand and a 1-drop 20k body. Like, that's not something to look over either. That's a really cool aspect about the card. So overall, I mean, this list has so much just data and testing put into it. Shen in the main board as well. I mean, this is super teched out. Very, very interesting. Going down to the sideboard, Gogeta Pursuit of Power is a very interesting choice, but it makes a lot of sense. The activate main, the -2 ability, allows you to remove the SS4 Broly SCR, which can be huge in that Gogeta Exodia matchup. So that's a pretty cool sideboard tech there. And then, of course, we have Duvall playing his very own card that he designed, Hirudegarn Accursed Destroyer. This card is very good in the Crimson Mirror match. When I was talking about the Super Players build and how they seem to build their Crimson way more geared toward the mirror, they're maining this card. And this card is really strong in the mirror, gets you ahead in energy, starts whittling your opponent's resources. It's a deflect battle card, so it's not weak to God Sealing. There's a lot of things about this card in particular that makes it really good in the mirror match. So very, very strong pick for sure. And then some ratio fixing stuff. We have a Jiren, we have some Kami for board removal, 2 more Smoke Dragons. So yeah, I mean, this sideboard just, it's the first place national winner sideboard. It's very, very good. All right, now I want to go over to the 3rd place Trunks Vegeta list. I don't think a lot of people put stock into this deck going into this event, and that includes myself. I did not think this was going to be one of the better decks, although it can use the Slug engine very, very well, which we see here is actually at a 3-3 split. I wonder what the thought process was behind that, because it does feel like in the Gogeta matchup you need to see this engine as soon as physically possible, to where 4-4 might be a necessary evil. But I mean, depending on matchup, obviously you don't want Slug, so I guess 3-3 is kind of a concession to that. But overall, this does look like relatively standard Trunks Vegeta. We're seeing more and more builds play the, follow the assistant super combo where you can search it off the Bulma. Maybe that's becoming a bit more standard for this leader. Going down over to the sideboard, we have a series of unisons. What kind of unisons we have in the main deck? It looks like we are not playing unisons in the main board. So the sideboard here looks like it has the ability to kind of bring in a unison for the situation that the player needs, right? So Unison of Fury, bring it in against, probably Gogeta 8, maybe even Sin Shenron. Just use it to stall for a turn and not allow their overcosted cards to attack. We have Gohan, which is obviously great for endgame pushes, but also for draw power. And then we have Trunks just kind of serving as that mid-game beater. Definitely a really solid one. And then we have SS Goku, the Hero Returns. Someone pointed this card out to me, and it's actually super interesting. This is really cool. So basically, activate battle. If you have a yellow Trunks future card with energy cost of 3 or more in play, you can play this card from your hand, and it's free. It's only a 10k battle card, so it's not super threatening, but it is free. Auto when this card's played, choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards, and this card itself, and returns the owner's warps. At the end of the turn, negate the skills of all cards played, and return them to their owner's battle areas. I know I kind of butchered the effect there, but basically what this does is temporarily warps this card and another battle card your opponent has. But what's so cool about that is it just destroys Z battle cards, because Z battle cards, when they get removed from the game, they're gone. They're not coming back. So this is a really cool answer to things like Cell Awakening of the Created. That's a very, very cool tech against cards like that. Super, super interesting. All right, then we have the highest placing SS4 Gogeta build. We'll take a quick look at this just to see what Gogeta looks like in the modern Set 19 format, because we saw a lot of Gogeta in like European Nationals, but that was Set 18. So we want to see how it changed going into Set 19, right? Honestly, going through it, looks pretty standard. We have our Pot of Greed guys preparing to brawl, of course. We have our 1 Yamcha. We have our 3 Testing the Ops. 2 Dark Broly's, I think, is definitely becoming a bit more standard. We've swapped over to the Vegeta SCR, though. This is something that our Gogeta players on our team have done as well, because it's just so good against the blue decks. Like, Vegito is incredible in the Red Mirror, but I think with the changes on the Set 19 ban list and the power that blue gained from Set 19, I think you do need this SCR to help hedge those matchups. I think it's really important. 3 Broly Crown, of course. 2 Beerus Balls, now our main deck answer to things like Riposte or other sorts of floodgates. King Vegeta's Imposing Presence, which I actually personally found to be quite annoying as a Crimson player. Crimson does have a lot of multi-attackers, and King Vegeta's Imposing Presence is very good against multi-attackers. So this does seem like a really solid main board for Gogeta going forward. Wolfang Fist and Smoke Dragon main board. Smoke Dragon just might find its way into every main board possible. I mean, Sen can't play it, but this card is kind of insane. And then Goten Hyper Speed Rush. It's a card that I always felt Gogeta didn't need, but still, I mean, it's an incredible Red Saiyan. It's not a bad card by any means. It's just like, I don't know if the deck needs it, but it's really, really good. Going down to the sideboard, Divine Presence helps play around Buu Unison. Violent Rays, even with the errata, is still a good sideboard card. It just shuts out certain matchups like Vegito, for example. Mai, great against blue. We have the King Vegeta to stop any of the free counterattacks like Dormant or Sparking D Magic. Shin in the side, of course, a 3rd Smoke Dragon. This is definitely looking like a pretty solid sideboard. Then we have a green Gotenks that's squeaked in the top 32. The only green leader, I believe. That's kind of crazy. So going through this seems pretty standard. We are going through 4 of the SS3 Gogeta Carefree Combatant. And if I take a quick look through, is this our only Unison in the deck? It appears to be our only Unison in the main board. Yep. So this Unison came out with the starter deck. It helps you find your Gotens and Trunkses. So it does increase the consistency of the deck overall. And it does increase the hand size, although it just keeps adding Gotens and Trunkses to your hand. So you're not necessarily seeing like a diverse, strong pool of cards. But again, consistency is probably key with Gotenks, because when I was first testing it, the one thing I didn't like about it is that you have to open a very specific hand. And if you don't open that specific hand, your game can be pretty rough. So if you have Gokul on 1 and this on 2, your game should be pretty solid. Like, you should be hitting your curve and playing the cards you need to play. Then we have the Cell Max SCR, just a 1-drop 40k quad striker, like no big deal, right? If this thing gets killed, you wipe your opponent's whole board and crit one of their lives. It puts your opponent in a very interesting predicament, I'll say that for sure. Then we have 2 copies of Gohan Latent Power Unleashed, the Gohan rare for green. This card single-handedly wipes out a Buu Unison. This card is very strong. Maybe Gotenks is something that needs to be explored further, and maybe it's actually a force in the format, especially if Crimson's looking this good. This card is just so insane for green. It's incredible. Then we go over to a Beerus ramp build. I've been talking about this deck, guys. I think this deck is really, really good. I think it's probably the best ramp deck in the game. We don't see any Reboot Goku in this top 32. Not to say that's a bad deck or anything, but I do think Beerus has a lot going for it. Going through this build, one thing that stands out to me immediately is Group Leader Pilaf. This is a tech that I also saw the super players using in their Crimson builds. This is such an interesting tech, and I'll tell you guys why. I didn't think about this card in a million years. So basically, what this is good against is Red Sin Shenron, and the reason it's so good is because it's a counter battle card attack. That makes it immune to Almighty Resistance, because Almighty Resistance specifically counters a counter attack. It doesn't counter any counter in the game, it only counters counter attacks. The wording there is very specific. So Pilaf being a counter battle card attack gets around Almighty Resistance, so you can use it, and in the counter step you're going to be able to remove the 8-drop or whatever battle card's barrier. And then if you have the Boo Unison on board, you can spin it, or if it's a Rush Tech Vegeta, you can use Beerus Destroys to bottom deck it. This is such a cool card. Very, very cool tech that we've pulled out of, what is it, set 2? That's insane. But going through the rest of the main board, just very standard ramp stuff. 2 Tide, 2 Kale, 4 Borgos in the main. I wonder if this player was expecting a lot of blue mirrors. And I'm also surprised, too, this was cut down to 50 cards exactly. That is very, very consistent. That's a really cool thing that we haven't seen in Dragon Ball in quite some time. A lot of players are playing, like, 52 or more cards because they want to fit options into their deck. Not only that, but the way this game is played, deck out in a long, grindy matchup is just a high possibility. So that's something you always want to consider. And then we have the Baby Hatch SCR, which is quite interesting to me. Obviously, Kaioken Goku feels like it could be broken in this deck because you're ramping to such a high number of energy. But I do like this pick because I do think that going second against red can be tough for Beerus. So I think you need the potential turn ender when you come across the red decks. And I would be willing to bet this was quite helpful for this player in this top cut. And then going down to the sideboard, I saw a lot of one-of Cunnings. Like, a lot of my opponents were siding one-of Cunning, and of course they're playing it against me all the time. I played the Kaioken SCR, but yeah, still you have it for the Kaioken SCR, and in a 50 card deck you're going to see it more often than not, I guess. Maybe that's not completely accurate, but still, I mean, it's more consistent in a 50 card deck than it is in like a 56 card deck. But yeah, down here, just a lot of the good stuff you would expect to see. I do want to go over the set 2 Vegito leader here and, just see what this is all about. So it seems that we are not playing a Unison in this build. I don't think Vegito needs a Unison. Just doesn't seem necessary. I think you have to fit a lot of other stuff into the deck, and a Unison doesn't really make sense because your first 2 energy are basically spent to get Z awakened, and then after that you're just dropping a Vegito on your opponent's head every single turn, right? Imposing Presence, again, very good against Crimson. Super solid card. Angel of U7 Whis, incredible in this deck because of the yellow. Like, having all 4 colors on turn 1, this is live whenever you need to. And in this format, negating a key attack is actually so huge. You can stop SS4 Gogeta from awakening. You can stop Crimson from awakening in certain scenarios. So this card's incredible. It seems like every single deck is just playing blue silver bullets because they just happen to be good and they happen to have the silver bullet effect. Like, it's not because blue's overpopular or anything. This is a Vegeta you play in this deck, right? And Borgos is a Saiyan you play in Crimson. Just so happens that they have that blue silver bullet ability, which is so good. Lots of yellow in here. This red-green super combo choice I find quite interesting as well. It doesn't draw, which is definitely a little bit suspect, but it does provide an immediate blocker, which can always be good in aggro matchups. It's almost like more copies of Whis Negate or Testing Yop. That is definitely quite interesting. And then for good measure, we have 1 Ratted Saiyan Youth, because why not, right? And then you're just rounding out your different Gokus and Vegetas and Vegitos. Down to the sideboard, Broly Crown, of course, a red staple. Smoke Dragon Man, every deck here is playing Smoke Dragon, whether it's main or sideboard. The card is just way too versatile and way too good. And then we have the yellow Cunning here. I don't know if it really matters what color Cunning you play. Just note that you have to pay yellow energy for this. I don't know if it would maybe be easier for this deck to pay red energy for the Cunning or what, but it is more yellow in case you want to, use certain yellow effects, which I don't think this build is playing Nimbus. It doesn't look like it from my initial glance, but you would want to pitch it for Almighty Resistance, so I guess that is an option for sure. And then finally, I want to go over Tim Palacios' Pan build. This guy is, I believe, 3 for 3 on topping American Nationals with a Pan leader of some sort. Of course, the first 2 were with OG Pan, and now we are here with Pan Reboot for another top cut performance. So yeah, I'm not going to pretend to be a Pan expert by any means. Really cool inclusion here is the GVT trio. You see kind of like the middle right-ish part of the page. That is a really cool card. Play it in Pan, 25k, draw a card. It goes over any Saiyan in your deck. This is a really neat inclusion. Flight of the Grand Eagle, also incredibly interesting. I guess this deck, can put out a somewhat sticky board where it's got a fair amount of barrier and you can minus those cards to get 100k power. It's kind of like an after image where you don't have to take a life. We have the Vegito SCR, which of course could be this or Vegeta, depending on your preference. Dark Rejuvenator Toa is super interesting. Can this restand Pan United Emotion? And wow, if that's a thing, that's actually really, really cool. A really, really cool tech by Tim here. And the sideboard is, man, we are reaching back into the Chain Zeno. That is crazy. That's so interesting too, because I don't think many people would expect this. Even though it is a Pan leader, we just haven't seen Pan adopting the strategy for quite some time. So this probably caught a ton of players off guard. This is a really cool thing. But yeah, guys, that goes over a lot of the decks that I wanted to cover here. I'm going to link this down in the description. This is ppgeventmanagement.com. This is where you guys can find literally all the deck lists. I will drop that down in the description. But yeah, super crazy event. Lots of great news with the online client. Lots of interesting stuff with Crimson coming out into the limelight. So with that being said, guys, hope you enjoy. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this format, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video.